computing power has become dirt cheap right now, right? So complex computations are actually pretty cheap to be done right now, which was something that people used to aspire to do. You can actually make it a reality.
Today on Technado, we'll be talking big data with Krishnan from LatentView Analytics. We've also got a lot of security news to talk about, as well as how Netflix is storing your Bandersnatch data. That's all coming up on Technado, starting right now. Hello and welcome to Technado. I'm your host, Peter Van Rysdam, and I'm joined, as always, by Don Pizzette and a familiar face for those of you that have joined us before on Technado, Mr. Ronnie Wong. Ronnie, how you doing today?
I'm doing fine, Peter. Thank you for having me back as we get to talk about the articles ahead of us here. Hopefully it'll be a fun time.
Yeah, we got a lot of cool security news, a couple of funny stories, actually.
And you know, before we get into those, Peter, let me just say, Happy Valentine's Day.
That's right.
Yeah,
I don't have a Valentine's Day song or anything or a card.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
Whatever that, yeah.
Yeah, for those of you just listening, Ronnie is making the Justin Bieber heart hands.
That's right.
Which I assume that's the only place
I don't have a clue.
Yeah, it's the Biebs doing it. But yeah, Don's got a little red peeking out through his shirt there. It's Valentine's Day when we're recording this, and so by the time you're listening to this, you've already enjoyed your overpriced meal, and and the flowers are already starting to wilt on the counter. So,
but the chocolates probably will still be good.
Yeah. So
It'll
happy President's Day.
There we go.
Everyone. All right, well, let's get to our first article. It is over on ZDNet.com. New TLS encryption busting attack also impacts newer TLS 1.3. Well, I don't know if I'm even using 1.3 yet.
You most likely are,
Oh,
right?
okay.
So most people, when they go to an encrypted web page, they say, oh, look, we're using SSL. But the reality is SSL versions 1, 2, and 3 have all been compromised and they're not used anywhere anymore. TLS 1.0 was compromised. So most websites are using TLS 1.1, 1.2, or 1.3, with 1.3 being regarded as the most secure. Well, new attack, we shouldn't say it's a new attack. It's actually a variation on an incredibly old attack, an attack from the late 1990s, so a 20-year-old attack that has been consistently evolved and changed, which is called the Blankenbacher attack, has been tweaked in a way that can be used against systems running TLS 1.3. The most important detail that I can share with you here is that the attack is actually not on TLS 1.3 itself. There's a trick they use to downgrade it to TLS 1.2, and then they're able to compromise it. So it's really an attack on TLS 1.2, but there's a weakness that can trick most systems into dropping from 1.3 down to 1.2.
It's nice to see those old attacks coming back. It's kind of like style. I mean, the clothes will come back from 20 years ago, and now the attacks. That's who could have seen that coming?
Well, anybody in this case, because it's come back multiple times. Let's see, ZDNet, they did a really good job somewhere here in the article. Here, they list all the instances that it's come back. So 2003, 2012, 2014, 3 times in 2014,
Yeah, a good
2015,
year.
2016. It got some cool names in 2017 and 2018, and now we can add 2019 to that list. One more for the record books.
I don't know why you need a cool name when you've got Bleckenbacher. Do you know what that's from?
From
Daniel
Microwave
discovered
Popcorn.
it?
Orville Bleckenbacher.
Yeah, the original attack named
I believe
after a
that's
Swiss cryptographer here demonstrated that it could first be successful. And so when you start to see something like that, it's funny because I like the subtitle of the actual article itself, where at the very end they're saying, well, it's once again yawn. That kind of lets you know that even though as great as this attack is, it's something new, apparently it's still old. And it seems like with a recurring issue like this, Don, I mean, where do you think it's starting to miss or what's happening?
So the main problem here, what it really boils down to is that TLS is not perfect, right? And it leveraged an encryption algorithm in it, one of the earlier versions of AES, that just isn't very strong. And so when the original weaknesses in TLS 1.0 were found, instead of replacing AES with something stronger, they just put in countermeasures, something to kind of patch it for this problem. And over the years, they keep putting out more and more countermeasures. So the standard keeps changing. And that's why you have TLS 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. It's not TLS 2.
Right.
It's just these little variations. And it's up to the vendors, the people who are making routers and firewalls and servers and web servers and stuff. that they have to implement this technology. And the more patches you introduce, the more likely it is somebody doesn't implement it properly. And that's exactly what's happened with each and every one of these instances, is there will be some implementation of TLS that's just not perfect, and attackers can take advantage of that, and all of a sudden you end up with a compromised stack. This is also a cache attack, so it's not an instantaneous one. It actually has to work by leaking data out of the cache on the server to be able to basically eventually calculate out the private key that system is using. So it's really significant when it works, but it does take a lot of effort to make it happen. In today's world, it'll usually be detected before somebody takes advantage of it. So this is kind of a researcher attack, not necessarily a real world one, but it doesn't usually take but a couple of years before a researcher attack becomes something real in the field.
All right, sounds good. Well, let's move over now to our next article over at infosecurity-magazine.com. Great URL. It's the Infosecurity Magazine. Firms urged to patch serious container runtime flaw. And Don, before we get into it, I'll just want to say I'm really sick and tired of lazy journalists using shipping containers on any container article, because when you first sent me this headline, I just had the thumbnail and I was like, wait, this is about
actual
shipping?
containers.
Yeah, it's like a logistics thing. What is going on here? Oh no, it's containers.
Security experts at Masterlock have been called in.
It's just lazy. It's super lazy. Just try harder. So what's this all about?
Security's been compromised by giant bolt cutters, and
Well,
so
Which still works
security is
today.
number one.
Yeah, so
yeah. Well, the big advantage of containers is that we can create an application in a consistent environment. So developers can work on it in a consistent environment, and then it gets deployed in production in an environment that exactly mirrors what we developed on. That's the nice part about it. But there's always that risk that the application running inside of the container could potentially escape. And by escape, I mean access the host operating system underneath it. And usually the containers are nice and jailed, they're blocked off so that whatever runs inside of the container stays inside of the container, much like Las Vegas. Unfortunately, this particular vulnerability is in the runC library that powers Docker, Kubernetes, LXC, a number of other containers, not just Docker. People always think Docker because that's the big one, but it's really all of them these days. And it allows a malicious application in a container to then spawn processes in the host. And they spawn them with root level permissions, which includes the ability to even launch more containers. So an attacker can actually have their own container images they can deploy with this and have full root level access. It's pretty much as bad as it gets. Like, you can't have an attack worse than this. It still requires an attacker to compromise an initial container, but then once they're in, they can leapfrog and use the runC exploit to be able to drop down and compromise that host underneath. So that's bad.
I'm sorry, Don. I wasn't paying attention. I'm still thinking about these containers. It's like any Java article has coffee on it because there's just no visuals to go with this stuff.
That's true.
I'm sorry, but Ronnie, did you have any comments on that?
Well, I think it's kind of neat that some of the other articles that have talked about this as well said, you're probably not going to really have to worry about it if you've been updating your Docker or Kubernetes or anything, because they've probably patched it already. But I guess they're talking to a big group or a big segment which is just not updating these particular management platforms and saying, well, you'll be fine if you update, but update now. Go ahead and do it. Don't keep waiting. So why Don? So you've been in long.
Yeah.
Why in the world are people just going, maybe next week or maybe 3 months from now?
I got one word for you. DevOps, right? DevOps is the problem here. And the deal is, if you're a developer and now you're being forced to be the operations person as well, you want to work on containers, right? So you install Docker. Now, your containers are going to run on top of that, and that's what you work in. And so you're probably going to update your containers. You want your containers working as well as possible. But honestly, the underlying engine, what do you care if it's up to date or not? Your container's going to run because that's what they're designed to do. So there's really no motivation to update the underlying host. And if you're a big cloud provider, it's kind of the same thing. Like, hey, as long as the containers are running. So that's kind of what happens there. And that's a problem. Now, in this scenario, if you were updating, then there is already a patch that's out, so that takes care of it for most of them. I didn't see if there was one for LXC yet, but there probably is. They're usually good about that. But the other thing is, if you're using SE Linux will jail the containers even beyond their normal jail. So if somebody escaped the container, they're still within the SE Linux jail, and you would be perfectly fine, even if you didn't patch. However, I bet if we made a challenge of this, I could probably find at least 15 dev blogs in the next 10 minutes, all containing instructions on how to disable SE Linux, because it's kind of annoying to work with and people turn it off. It's like weakening the security of your system. So it just goes to show where if you're in a DevOps role or if you're working with containers or whatever, you can't neglect system administration. You've got to be taking proper security precautions.
And if you work in DevOps, you can reach out to Don at info@technado.com. Did we set that up yet?
Yeah.
I don't think we did. I did a test and it bounced back. Let's set that up.
Well, set that up. We probably have your email address blacklisted.
But yeah, just reach out to Don and let him know that he's wrong if you're a DevOps person.
Yeah, let me know that you fail to update your stuff and it runs fine all the time.
All right. Let's do point counterpoint next week. We'll get someone from the dev team over here. All right. Speaking of security, we're sticking with that over at bleepingcomputer.com. A new offensive. You did that. You said that before, and it messed with me.
This cable offends me, sir.
New offensive USB cable allows remote attacks over Wi-Fi. So this is a technology that's been around for a while, or this kind of thing.
This is a little variation on something that's been around a while. So basically, I'm going to call him a security researcher, but I think it's just a hobbyist, created a cable, and a cable that just looks like a regular lightning cable. So it's a USB. What is that? USB A on one end or B? What the heck is that, Ronnie?
That's
B,
A.
isn't it?
Oh, is that
okay.
A? That is
USB A on
yeah.
one end, and then the lightning connector on the other. And inside of the plastic sheathing for that USB A connector, he put a microcontroller in there. And so it's basically a fully operational computer that's wired into the USB bus, and it has a Wi-Fi chip in it. And the idea is that if you plug this cable into a computer and then you plug it into your iPhone, that he's now able to man-in-the-middle attack that device. It also registers as a keyboard, so he can send keystrokes to the device and a mouse. He can view the screen in some scenarios, and it's all being driven by this via Wi-Fi. So it's a pretty weak antenna, so you have to be within a certain range of it. But a normal end user is just going to see this as a regular cable and not even realize that it's got this malicious payload inside of it. And, Peter, you mentioned this has been around a while. If you've watched our security shows over at ITProTV, I actually had to buy something similar like this for Daniel to use in one of his security shows. And I pulled this up. If you go to Amazon and just do a search for USB keylogger, there is a whole selection of devices that do this exact same thing. Some of them just record keystrokes, but most of them have Wi-Fi built into them where they can transmit all the keystrokes that are being sent. And they're designed to plug in between a keyboard and the computer. But some of them, like this one right here, the AirDrive Forensic Keylogger cable, it's a USB extension cable. That's what it looks like from the outside. It's just an extension cable. But it has, just like in this project, a microcontroller built right into that housing that has Wi-Fi in it. It's powered off the USB port, and it's a completely stealthy way to attack somebody's system. So this goes back to the old physical security model. Keeping an eye out for devices like this is a really, really hard thing to do. We used to do a little practical joke on people where you'd take a wireless Logitech mouse and you'd stick the little wireless receiver on the back of their desktop computer, because nobody looks at the back of their computer. And then you could stand across the room moving the mouse around and kind of freaking people out, like, why is my mouse moving? And it's just a little dongle on the back of the computer.
Yeah, so the one you brought up on Amazon is about $40. This one ran him about $4,000 to make.
Mm-hmm. Huh.
So
not making the best decisions.
Should have maybe headed over to
checked out Amazon
first. Yeah,
could have had it in 2 days.
Reverse engineered it, take the part out if you want to make it a lightning cable. But I think my big question is, does it still charge? Because I could still see kids using it.
Yeah, I would. I would assume
if they said, "Hey, they're taking your data, but my battery's really low." So
these types of attacks have been talked about. Remember when Starbucks started putting out the charging stations at all their places, and everybody was saying, like, "Do not plug in at Starbucks because they could be compromised." You would know it. You'd plug in to charge your phone, like, "Oh, look, it's so nice. They provide a charger." And meanwhile, you're getting rootkitted or whatever when you plug in. I don't know if that ever actually happened, but that was the story.
And meanwhile, Starbucks like, we never put out charging stations. Who did that? Don't use those. We're actually we bought some of those land turtles from Hack 5 that we're gonna have at our booth at RSA coming up next month. So head over to that if you're in town for
Yeah.
that, and you can win one.
And those work a little bit differently. You know, they plug into a USB port, but they look like a USB network adapter. And so you plug it in, and it'll actually clone the MAC address of the internal MAC network adapter and use that so it becomes invisible on the network. And then it can do a reverse SSH tunnel. So now you can be sitting at home and remote into some private network somewhere. They're really cool. And those are not outrageously expensive,
about $40
right?
as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those should only be used for pen testing purposes or on your own systems.
Absolutely.
Or to monitor your children or loved ones. Like those ones that you brought up on Amazon that are just, it looks like it's just USB to USB. I mean, I would notice that, I feel like, on the back of my computer, like, hey, why is this here? If it's something like the USB extension or lightning cable, that's a lot less likely for someone to actually see. And
well, you would notice this one on your laptop, right? Because it would be right there. But if you have a desktop and the tower's under your table, you know, something, you would notice that.
that's a very good point.
All right, so Don, let me ask a technical question here. If it's got a Wi-Fi in it, let's think about this. How do they get past the ability to do something like WPA2? Does it just automatically find the actual SID and also the password that we would normally require?
It depends on how it's set up. So like the one Daniel has, it doesn't join some company's wireless network. It generates its own.
Okay.
And so it'll be an unnamed SSID. You know, like when you run a wireless scan, sometimes you see these unnamed SSIDs. They're usually TVs because they have Wi-Fi remotes or whatever. But it'll be an unnamed SSID. Okay. And the attacker will have to come back into proximity, you know, usually within like 30 feet or something. But if they run an app on their phone, that's the way his works, it just immediately connects and downloads all the keystrokes. Right. And then off you go. Or you could plant a device somewhere else in the network. So it's its own wireless network. I mean, I guess if you knew the WPA password, which, hey, a lot of companies, they have that guest network you can jump on, and so you take advantage of that. But if somebody's monitoring their network, they should see the weird traffic and be able to identify it.
Cool.
Well, the big takeaway here is don't borrow cables from Daniel.
Yes.
Yeah, don't
Good
borrow
advice.
cables from
Good advice.
Daniel.
If you happen to work at our company and are watching this, I'm sure every office has a Daniel, though.
And, you know, the sad part is, like, he could have just left that cable on his desk one day, and somebody else could say, oh, look, USB extension cable, I could use that, and not even know it, and now it's plugged in somewhere.
But you would have to have a password to get on, or to connect to that Wi-Fi network? Okay.
Yep.
So I can't just see who else is using it.
Well, I mean, that's assuming Daniel put a password on it. Maybe he just left it open. Who knows?
It's all about open source. All right, let's move over now to VentureBeat.com. This is an Apple story. Pirates. Oh, yes, pirates. Pirates hijack Apple's enterprise certificates to put hacked apps on iPhones, which, you know, I've been waiting for third-party apps without having to use the App Store. So is this how I do this without having a jailbreak?
Sure. You just have to get an eye patch and a peg leg, and you got it. The headline's a little misleading because the pirates haven't hijacked anything. What happens here is, and we actually just reported last week about how Apple yanked Facebook's developer certificate so they couldn't publish internal apps. And Google was going through the same thing, and so Apple yanked theirs too. I don't think we have a news story on that one, but they did. Everybody, I think, saw that coming. Well, this is not hijacking. Like anybody, you and me, we could actually. I already have one. You can go to Apple, you can pay $100, and they will issue you a certificate, and you can publish your own apps. So hackers and pirates, software pirates, have been doing this for years. In fact, there's a website. Let me see if I can remember. Build.io or builds.io. I think it's just build.io. Let me see if I can pull it up here. Where if you want to run emulators, right? Like you want a Game Boy emulator, a Nintendo emulator. Here it is. So it's builds.io. And what they do is they pay $100 to Apple. They get a certificate, and they compile all these apps that would never get approved in the Apple App Store. Ones like somewhere in here they have like a Spotify that doesn't play ads, and without paying for a subscription, it just blocks the ads somehow. So they do these like modified things, and they sign them with their certificate, which is listed as a valid developer certificate, and they run them until Apple figures it out and shuts them down. And then they just go and create a new account and pay another $100 and get a new certificate, and they start issuing them again.
But if you have those things on your phone, you have them. Right? I mean, is it like, I know when they pull an app sometimes.
Once they kill the cert, the app stops. So you got to get the new cert. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Which is not a big deal. You know, once a month or every other month, you just get this new certificate. Now, granted, you are totally trusting somebody who has an illegal business model, which is these are a series of bad decisions involved
you
here.
get to play Game Boy on your
You
iPhone.
get to play Game Boy on your iPhone.
That's a
Absolutely.
risk I'm willing to take on the company network.
I think they charge, I don't know, $10 or something like
never
that.
mind.
So, so for every 10 people that sign up, that pays for the certificate. And then beyond that, they're making money. So they're making money by selling this illegal software. And this has been going on for a long, long time. So I'm not exactly sure where the VentureBeat thing came from. I think maybe they just became aware of it because of Google and Facebook losing their search last week. But there's numerous Chinese websites that are pushing these. There's U.S. websites that are pushing it too. It's just something I will tell you right now, even if you don't have any money, but you just have to play Game Boy on your iPhone, these apps are bad news. Anytime you're using a signed one of these developer certificates from a shady source, they can install whatever they want. Anything can be compiled into that app. It's not a good idea.
Should just get an actual Game Boy.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, they're not that expensive.
All right, I'll do that. All right, our next article is over on the BBC, bbc.com. Russia considers unplugging from the internet. So I know this. They're talking about it kind of as a test run to see how that could work. But is this kind of like where they'd be like China or North Korea, where they kind of have their own internet? China doesn't. So they've got the firewall, but.
So there's two sides of this story. So technically China has their own internet, but it's connected to the big internet. So we just kind of treat it the same. It's like saying a city has roads, a county has roads, and a state has roads. Well, they're all connected together, right? So that's how it is. But China has their firewall. So at any moment they could draw a line and say that's it, and just close it off to just China. Well, Russia is doing the same thing. They've got it positioned where they're not done yet, but they're getting there, where all of the ISPs will flow through government-controlled connections so that they can basically turn off the outside world. And there's a couple of reasons for this. The cynical reason is to look at it and say, because they want to intercept all of their citizens' traffic, which I'm sure they do. But the other side is, let's say cyber warfare actually broke out in full, right? So we already have cyber warfare right now, but it's not like at a crazy heat wave yet. But let's say that it did. Russia could flip a switch and say that's it. No outside traffic comes in, and now their network would be up and running. Now networks can do that; they'll be perfectly fine. But there's one component that causes a problem, and that's DNS. That there's 13 root hint servers, and none of them are in Russia. So if they cut off from the outside world, they lose the ability to do name lookups. And so what they're doing is creating an alternate name structure so that when they flip that switch and they cut off, that they'll take over the IPs and names of all of those root hint servers. They've got to redirect them with BGP to basically point them to the Russian version. And so that way their network stays up and they can continue to operate. Now, that means that they could probably take over those name servers on the real internet if they put enough effort into it. So there's a whole attack vector here. And some people are looking at this and being critical of Russia, but I'm looking at it and saying, man, I really hope the U.S. is doing the same thing because we need to be able to protect that.
And hopefully just not publicizing it maybe, but going on behind the scenes. So just want to understand, are you saying like fully shut off from everything else, or can people within Russia still get out? People from here just can't get in?
So for the test, when they do that cut, no one in, no one out. Wow. It's a wall. Everything will be inside. And they've been making big pushes that, hey, if you're a company that's handling accounts for Russian citizens, you need to have your servers in Russia. And that's a big reason why they've been kind of pushing that, is to get this set up where they can draw that line, but Facebook will still run. Or Amazon.ru will still run. I don't think there is an Amazon.ru, but those things will still run because their servers are actually in that network. You can't allow people out when you do a cutoff like this, because somebody will just fire up a VPN tunnel or fire up Tor, right? Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden you've got a tunnel in and out of the network. So it's got to be a hard cut. No one in, no one out.
Amazon.ru does redirect to Amazon.com.
All right, so
/ref equals RD _ www _ Amazon _ RU _ EN. So is this just an English version of
Or did someone sign up for an affiliate link?
Oh, no. Yeah.
So if you go to Amazon.ru,
It's got my
5%
browsing
of
history.
every
Yeah.
purchase goes to some college kid.
There you go. Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it's interesting that they're talking about that there's a draft law mandating that this is to be done. So obviously, they, at least from what I'm reading here, is that they're saying that they need to be independent in some way, somehow. They don't feel like that being tied to the global internet itself is a necessarily forward-thinking or strategic thing for them, whereas being able to stand alone after, if something does happen, that they need to still be up and running. So it doesn't seem like a bad thing necessarily. Maybe that will also stop some of the Russian traffic from coming this way too.
So, some of the activists inside of Russia are saying that it is a bad thing, that as soon as this test is done, it'll prove that all traffic runs through systems controlled by the government. And so the government will be able to see everything that's sent and block Tor and things like that. That's up to them and their government to decide whether that's good or bad. It is going to happen before April 1st. They haven't set an official date. And, a moment ago I said there were 13 root hint servers. The article says there's 12 organizations. Am I wrong? Are there only 12 root hint servers?
I thought there were 13.
Yeah, I did too. Maybe 2 of them are run by the same organization. I don't know.
Did they say how long this test will be? Because I'm like this could be disruptive, obviously, for people that do business with Russian firms, like the White House.
I don't think they said how long the test would be.
Come on, you didn't get that?
No.
My dig there. But...
I'll ask Vlad when I'm talking to him later this week.
Okay. All right. Hopefully it's just a brief little thing, so it's not disruptive to everyone there and here. All right, next over on The Verge, TheVerge.com, cloud backup service Backblaze is raising its prices. Customers can still lock in the old prices for another year. Are we doing a sales pitch? Is that what we're doing?
So this one, it's kind of funny. I just had a conversation last week with our head engineer here, Brad, and we were talking about Backblaze, right? Being able to back up all of your data. And I said, I don't understand how Backblaze stays in business. Like, they give you unlimited storage for, I don't know, $8 a month or something ridiculous like that. I just can't wrap my mind around how they're able to make money and stay in business. And so Brad reached out to me this morning like, oh, Don, you got to see. They raised their price. And I'm thinking, well, it's probably pretty significant. But they ended up raising it like $1 a month.
From $5 a month to $6 a month. And the annual fee will go from $60 or $260 from $50.
Yeah. Honestly, they could have doubled their price, and I still wouldn't understand how they stay in business. Like Amazon charges 10 cents per gigabyte per month for data that you store inside of S3. Well, these guys, they're storing, it's unlimited storage. So let's say you put a terabyte in there and you work that math out. I mean, it's less than a penny. Somehow their costs are way lower than Amazon's, but they still guarantee your data. It's not like they're just putting it on the junkiest drives possible. I'm always confused about. We need to find somebody over at Backblaze that we can interview and ask them, like, are you guys selling drugs on the side or something? How do you fund this organization? I don't understand.
Yeah, and they're saying that the increase is due to some updates and improvements that they've made over there. So removing all limits that can be backed up, sped up backups, expanded restore options, and of course a ton of other features that they actually have. So they're saying that helps to offset the cost of their improvements. Is what we're actually seeing here. So it doesn't look like it's just an improvement just to improve. But I did notice that if you do the 2-year plan instead, they charge you $110 instead of the $120 that they're going to. So it's still pretty good. I mean, yeah.
Honestly, they could triple their price and it would absolutely be worth it. This isn't a Backblaze commercial, but they do have a great service and it's super cheap. CrashPlan is the same way. CrashPlan is super cheap, operates in the same space as one of their competitors. Apparently, that business model just makes no sense to me. But they both offer great services, and if you're not leveraging some kind of backup solution, you really should be. If you're one of those people where all of your data easily fits in Google Drive or Microsoft OneDrive or whatever Dropbox that you're using, then maybe that's got you taken care of and you're fine. But if you want to back up like your whole system, that's where a lot of these products really shine. Right. And I think it's a CrashPlan where you get like a family account where they back up multiple computers. It's really a no-brainer for these guys, and they've got that pricing down, so there's no excuse for not doing it.
So head over to Backblaze.com, cloud storage that's astonishingly easy and low cost. There you go.
We should really get commission for this, shouldn't we?
750 petabytes stored and over 35 billion files recovered and counting. Backblaze.
All right.
Thank you, Peter.
If we were taking ads, we would have to disclose that, but this is not an ad.
So we were disclosing that it's not
We
an ad.
promise. Yeah, I'm disclosing that we're just big fans. All right, let's get to a couple of fun stories before we move on to our interview. This one we found over on Slashdot on their entertainment sub-site here. The 90s style Captain Marvel website will have you nostalgic for dial-up. And when they say 90s, we're talking like 94, 95 kind of website.
Peter, when did you start with the internet?
So I had an AOL account. I think my junior year in high school, so it would have been 94, 95. And then, so right around then. I mean, I actually did some message boards and stuff a little bit before then for games and things, but yeah, that was about when.
And Ronnie, how about you?
Probably 90, 91, 92,
Okay.
somewhere around there. I had a CompuServe account.
Yep.
So I had that. But I'm looking at this page right here. It really is
Let me bring it up here.
I
nostalgically,
gotta bring this up.
90s. There's no doubt about every inch of it.
Well, so when I look at it, first off, I mean, I've got it pulled up
Yeah.
here. It absolutely has every
Oh, a little pop-in.
pop out on the side, that was
everything
cool.
that the 90s had. Although, moving images,
not so
those were
much.
pretty hard to do back then.
Well, I will point out, if this were the 90s, this is still loading.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Those animated GIFs are going to slow things down.
But I didn't see any blinking text on here, and you really needed blinking text. That was a vintage 1990s thing.
Now, where's the mailbox that tells you, with the flag going up and down, to tell you where
Yeah.
you can send an email?
Or the under construction. There's got to be.
Wait
Everybody
a
had.
second. Do you see the big space there at the bottom under all the text?
Oh, yeah.
Is there hidden text under
like
there?
a wall of keywords?
Yeah.
No.
It's just...
Nope, not that I can
that's
see.
I
Lady
love
just keeps
she
popping
keeps
up.
popping in.
No, it's a massive footer that I wonder if my ad blocker is.
that could be. There could
Here,
be
let me turn that off for this site. We'll reload it and see. But because they used to hide all the keywords at the bottom of the page.
Yeah, that would be a true throwback if they went for that. Yeah, for those of you that are just listening to the podcast here, basically we've got the.
Captain Marvel.
Yeah, we're on the Captain Marvel site, but it's got like the starry sky background. We've got a couple of animated GIFs.
The gray
on
square
left and
buttons.
right. Yeah, gray square
counter.
buttons that are have that bevel on them. The counter at the bottom.
Comic Sans font pretty much everywhere.
Lots of Comic Sans, rainbows. If it can be animated, it's animated pretty much. Oh, by the way, the top of the page there did have the et button spinning for email.
For
so,
email.
I would have gone with the mailbox personally. That was my favorite back in.
They need the
HTML class.
supports Firefox icon or
Netscape.
Mosaic Netscape. Yeah.
Best viewed in Netscape.
Yeah.
Well, that's a fun one.
Frames. See, if they had frames on here, that would really, the little navigation bar on the left side.
Everything has when it has a scroll bar in the navigation.
Yeah.
Too. That's always fun.
But anyhow, it's always neat to see somebody. We used to bring up the Space Jam website, which I think is probably still up. Because the Space Jam website, they made it, it's like vintage 1990s. Oh, yeah, here. And they've left it, and it's kind of become this tribute to what the 90s were.
Yeah.
And, you've got the
same background.
repeating background, but it's such a low resolution that you see the repeating image. Most of the stuff, you can still click on it. But yeah, this website actually came out in the 90s. They just haven't changed it at all. It's got frames. Look at that.
Oh, very nice. Yeah, I love spending some time on archive.org and just going back to old sites that I remember. Half the time the images don't load or something because you can just maybe see a screenshot. But but this is fun to actually see it. Well, it takes you back.
It does.
Good times.
All right, let's go over to our last article. This one is on Vice, on motherboard.vice.com. Netflix has saved every choice you've ever made in Black Mirror Bandersnatch. And, that's interesting. The way that this was found out is kind of even more interesting. So for those that don't know, and I actually haven't seen it yet, but Black Mirror Bandersnatch is kind of like a choose-your-own-adventure interactive Netflix movie where you're literally making choices on your remote and you're seeing a different movie based on those choices you make. But a tech policy researcher used GDPR to request information about all of his choices for Netflix, and since it's his own personal data, they had to give it to him, and it did prove the point that yes, they are saving those choices that you make, which is kind of an interesting use of GDPR that they maybe hadn't thought of at first.
So I haven't seen it either. Have you, Ronnie?
I have not watched it.
Oh, sorry, all three of us have not watched
Perfect.
it. So like this crazy face here, that might not even be in the movie.
Right.
That might just be something Motherboard puts on there for fun.
That's frightening.
Well,
Yeah, that's why I haven't seen the movie.
did you guys see the article? I think it was actually 2 weeks ago, where the company that owns the trademark for Choose Your Own Adventure is suing Netflix.
Really?
And I guess Netflix had reached out to them to try and secure rights, and they couldn't reach an agreement. And Netflix said, you know what? We don't actually need the rights. And they just did it. So now they're getting sued.
It would have been cool to say, choose your own adventure, but I've noticed they haven't used those terms. But it's funny, especially not having seen the film, to see his data. It's got his choice was Frosties, then Sugar Puffs, then Now Thompson twins. Maybe I want to see this movie now, knowing that those are
The Thompson
our
twins?
choices. Yeah.
Work
you go.
at Tuckersoft.
Yeah.
Go back.
Joe
yeah.
was telling us that, because she's apparently watched it numerous times, she said you get to pick things like what kind of music the guy listens to, and then that music plays all throughout. So they must have like an 80s new wave choice for the Thompson twins to come up.
Oh, interesting.
But option 7J, kick him in the balls. So there we go. This guy's making great decisions. Karate chop
Karate
dad.
chop dad. Yeah. Don't keep scrolling, by the way.
Okay.
Not on the screen. Yeah.
So we haven't seen the movie now, but boy, we have a good idea what's going on.
Yeah. I will say, if I saw that face, kick him in the balls would be
Maybe
one of the
that's the
top
dad.
choices. Speaking of Valentine's Day.
Going back to the tech side a little bit on that GDPR, I know it's the most boring subject that we can talk about. So
Way to go, Ron.
Of course, I'll make that happen. So I thought it was neat as I read through the article that he said you had to be very specific about what you requested. You couldn't just say, "Give me all my data." You actually had to kind of list like exactly what you are looking for, and then they would give you that specific amount of
I
information.
thought you could say, give me all my data.
Well, not what he actually says here is that you really have to actually make sure that you request what you're actually looking for, or they're not, so there's a process that you have to go through. And he said it was fairly simple. He sent them a letter, and he just responded back, verified his identity, and they said, okay, just tell us what you're looking for, and we'll send it right to him. So it didn't require a whole bunch of paperwork. It just required him to be very specific about what he was looking for.
Yeah.
Well, it'll make them make a better Bandersnatch movie next time.
Doubtful.
If they have
I don't know if they'll actually be able to make one if they get
use
sued for
big
it.
data and AI to figure out how to make a better movie.
Yeah.
Which is a great segue to our interview we've got coming up here. We're going to be talking with Krishnan Venkata. He is at LatentView Analytics, and we're really excited to talk to him about big data and maybe if they can do this kind of stuff there, which I assume they can. Maybe.
Sure. Maybe they already are. Maybe they've already engaged with Netflix. Who knows?
Well, let's find out. That's coming up after this message right here on Technado.
I'm James Packer. I'm the General Manager of Kirk ISS based in the Cayman Islands. I used ITProTV extensively in my last place. It grew very well, helped upskill the team. I had 110 engineers in the field and we had dozens of IT Pro accounts with the guys training, and last year alone they passed over 40 certs by using the online training. I think I can safely say without ITProTV I wouldn't be where I was today, because I only got this job on the back of the qualifications I have.
All right, welcome back to Technado, and as promised, now we are joined by Krishnan Venkata, who's the Chief Sales Officer at LatentView Analytics. Krishnan, how you doing today?
Doing pretty good, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us, and let's get started by, why don't you let us know a little bit about what LatentView is for those that aren't familiar with it.
LatentView Analytics is a premier analytics consulting firm in the field of knowledge services. We've been in the business for over 12 years, focusing on deriving insights from data for leading companies across the globe.
So what kind of data, which type of analytics are we looking at here? I mean, I'm from a marketing background, so I think of analytics as Google Analytics and things like that, but obviously that's not what we're talking about here.
Sure. Anything that requires you to analyze data in a scientific way to get decisions. So it could be even as simple as something that you do on an Excel spreadsheet is analysis of data, to as complex as running predictive models on R and Python, etc. That's what you hear from this. So it's pretty much the entire spectrum, right? Analytics actually in marketing, as you would understand, is if I'm able to tell better how to target you as a customer at the right time, at the right place, with the right message, I'll get you interested. Now, determining that right time and the right place and the right message is where analytics comes into play, where it analyzes tons of data, tries to understand patterns, and says, hey, this person could potentially respond to this in a much smarter way because this is what we know about this person. And that prediction is what analytics is all about.
Okay, that makes sense. So are there specific industries you guys work in, or specific company sizes that are kind of a good fit for LatentView?
Sure. Typically, companies that have a lot of data and would like to make sense out of data are great target for us. And so we have worked with two types of companies. One is digital companies have got a boatload of data and they're trying to make better sense of it. And so there are a lot of digital firms like the PayPal and eBays of the world that have a lot of data that they want to make sense out of it. We are also now seeing increasingly traditional firms, or I would say the non-digital firms like there could be a PepsiCo, there could be Microsoft, etc., which would also do a lot of things with the data.
You know, I've been curious about this. Like, if you kind of watch it over the years, it's really changed a lot. Where 10 years ago, what you're doing is what companies dreamed they could have. They really wished they had that data so they could make intelligent decisions. And about 5 years ago, we started seeing technologies come about to make it possible. And now I think people are starting to freak out a bit about how some of this data can be used and how sensitive data gets collected. So for you, I mean, you guys are right at the front lines of that battle. So how's your organization react to that, or have you been affected? Is it more difficult to collect that data, or do you have to be more careful with how it's used? What does that look like for you?
Sure. The interesting thing about analytics is we don't necessarily need to know the person at all. So what you call as PII, which is the personally identifiable information, is what a lot of people are worried about. So I don't want to identify the person per se. All I want to identify is personas, right? So as long as that is the case, we are perfectly fine in fact, we have always been of the view that we should mask all the user information and look at personas for targeting. And so we actually find that stance has helped us being well prepared for it. We are compliant from a lot of purposes in terms of how we store the data, etc. And typically we work out of our clients' ecosystem, so it doesn't affect us at all. And the fact that we have always had the stance makes us better placed in the market to deliver our solutions.
Now, ultimately, who's responsible for that? Like, if a company comes to you for help and they've got, let's say it's medical records, something like really sensitive. Is it up to them to remove the PII before giving it to you, or do you guys help with that? What does that process look like?
We would actually ensure that the data that we have access to, one, if there is PII data, we will ensure that our people are compliant with all the regulations that are there that is needed to actually access that kind of data. I would say it's a dual responsibility in some way to be smart about it, which is the company that is providing the data needs to be careful about what data they're sharing with us. And as a provider of the services, we need to be careful of what data we have access to and what data can be used from a consumption pattern. So I guess kind of it lies on both plates, and it's not really something that one person owns or the other. And I would say that we strive to be proactive about how we maintain the data privacy of consumers that we work with.
And so when you get a set of data, or it's really a company, right? They come to you for help. They have information. Obviously, every company stores data different ways. So you probably never really know what somebody's going to have until you're sitting down and talking to them. When it's time for you guys to do your work, do you have like a consistent platform that you use, or is it really a custom solution for every customer? How does that go?
It's a great question, right? So in the first decade we've been around for business for about 12 years. In the first 10 years or so, we were doing pretty much all our business was custom analytics consulting. And what that meant is we used to work out of our clients' data centers, client servers, not necessarily take data out of that. So we used to just work directly out of them. In the recent times, we have been developing a host of solutions. We actually now have a chief product officer on our board. We have been building solutions. I would call them analytical products, which use data and have analytical platforms embedded in them to provide better insights to businesses. So we have one which is catered to the consumer goods industry, which is called Smart Insights. We have one which is catered to the retail, which is MatchView. In these cases, these platforms are actually hosted in the cloud. It could be AWS or Azure, etc. And so that data, and it can sit on top of, and the data could be in those specific data centers, and our solution can sit on top of that and deliver it. So I think a mix of it is changing. In terms of earlier, we were just primarily working out of the client's data centers, but now we also work out of the cloud quite a bit.
Now, I know I used to always fall in the camp of working with data is boring, and that it's statistics and analytics and all the courses that I hated in college. But over the last year, I know I've talked to a number of data analysts, and they've really had some cool projects that they've turned up. And so, how about you guys? Has there been any particular project that you felt was just like really, really neat or different than what you normally deal with?
I think it's been fairly exciting for us too. I mean, data, math, and stat has always been quite daunting to a lot of people, but at the end of the day, it's a lot of common sense if you think about it. Across the years, we've been fortunate to work with a lot of leading firms where we've done a lot of leading projects. Like recently, we worked with a company, a manufacturer of packaged goods, where they were trying to use sensor data to optimize the supply chain. This is a supply chain which is completely automated. There are only sensor data and robots that are there. There's no humans in that plant. How could you analyze all this data coming and improve the efficiency? There were about 20 to 25 plants that this consumer goods firm had. And we noticed that if you apply analytics smartly on that sensor data, you could have millions of dollars of savings that could be there. It was a really cool project on how we could analyze the data. We are analyzing data for automotive companies right now, trying to understand their sensor data and trying to see whether we can make better predictions around part failure. So if I can tell you tomorrow that your car is going to fail in the next 3 months on the oil gasket and you should change that today, wouldn't that be cooler rather than knowing today that I just need to take it in as a black box into the service center and just sign up for whatever he says? So that's some of the kind of exciting projects that we have been working on recently.
Yeah, I know continual process improvement is a big deal, especially in the industrial sector. And so it sounds like you guys drop right in there and are able to help isolate those areas where you can really improve. And people love it when you have a project that you can directly attribute a cost savings to. So, sometimes you get changes that are like quality of life changes where you can't say, well, that made us money or it lost us money. But when you can reduce defects, you can see exactly how much money that saves you.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right.
Now, projects, I know every project's a little bit different, but what's kind of the average timeline between when a company engages with you and before you're able to like give them information that has actionable results? Is this like something that happens really fast, a matter of weeks, or is this like a month-long, year-long thing? What does that normally look like?
It's a great question. So I think the initial time to insights takes about 6 to 8 weeks, because a lot of time it is about understanding the data and the business context in which the data needs to be interpreted. So typically when we get into businesses and for the first time, we notice that it takes about 6 to 8 weeks to get onboarded from a data perspective. Do they have the data in the right shape and form for answering the business questions that they're out to do? A lot of times businesses think they have the data, but they actually don't. And if they do, it's not in the right shape. So that requires some preparation. What we realize is over time, in 6 to 8 weeks, we start giving them some early signs of what we're able to see as we deliver our solutions. And from then on, it's an ongoing engagement of periodically giving them insights that help their business.
We're talking with Krishnan Venkata from LatentView Analytics. And Krishnan, I wanted to ask you, in the last few years, we've really seen come to the forefront kind of AI and things like that in terms of big data. You've been in this industry for a while, it looks like. Where do you see this going next? What's the next big thing on the horizon? Where's this industry moving?
See, there are more and more devices that are there in the home right now that are emitting a lot of information that's out there, right? I think they have now got smart homes, there is smart vehicles. A lot of the devices are now becoming basically data rich, right? So I think analytics is going to go from businesses to the consumer, right? And that's going to be a big move that you're going to see. You're also going to see a lot of the analytics being personalized, which is earlier it was a segment of users used to be targeted. Now you'll be personalized in terms of it. And I think personalized doesn't mean that identifying the person personally, but the persona in itself. So I think more and more of the analytics is going to go towards that, called analytics on the edge, analytics which is personalized, and analytics on to a consumer directly.
So I guess, yeah, if you're building personas, the more data you have, obviously, the better, and the more accurate those personas are. So it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you were kind of saying that maybe more companies, smaller businesses, can kind of get into this as well, because right now I think of the kind of companies that are probably looking at software like this are bigger companies that have a ton of data now. But over the next few years, we're going to see more and more small businesses, restaurants, mom and pops are going to start to have a lot of data that they can analyze.
No, absolutely. There is no reason, considering that there are 2-3 things that have happened in a big way, right? Computing power has become dirt cheap right now, right? So complex computations are actually pretty cheap to be done right now, which was something that people used to aspire to do. You can actually make it a reality. Servers can be deployed at just a click of a button, right? You can just spin up an instance, load data, analyze it, and just shut it down. So the entire process of doing this is so cheap right now, and even small businesses can do it. And you actually don't need a lot of data to actually start making good guided decisions in terms of it. The better the data, the more accurate the decisions. But with some data, you can start with some of this. So I think, pretty much a lot of businesses can do this. Even consumers will start doing analysis on the data that they are creating, for sure.
Now, you mentioned like a lot of companies can do this, and I know with cloud horsepower out there, we can get as many servers as we need if we have the data in the right format. But there is a human element that's really required here, and this is where the data scientists come in. And the reason companies need to seek out organizations like yours, I know you guys have a partnership with CMI where you work with the researchers there. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
See, I think analytics is a very interesting, to your point in terms of this, analytics is a great industry, but it's changing very quickly, right? There's so much research happening on the OR space, on the predictive analytics space, the optimization space, that as a company, we believe that while we are in the forefront of this, we wouldn't know it all, right? So what we also consciously want to do is, as we learn from a lot of deployments that we're doing at client locations and leading clients, we also want to make sure that we build our knowledge and capabilities by partnering with the leading institutes. So Chennai Mathematical Institute, or CMI, is one such institute that we have got a partnership in to understanding how we can make more robust techniques, data methods, etc. We have another one with the Indian Institute of Technology in Madras as well. Again, a great institute which is doing a lot of research, and we are tapping into some of the leading academic minds in the institute to basically build our knowledge within the space. We're also speaking in conversations with a lot of leading US-based organizations that are there as well. We're just fructifying some of those partnerships, and in the coming months, those would come out as well. But the idea is, a knowledge-based industry requires as much of academia bent of mind as much as it requires the corporate bent of mind.
Excellent. And, it's important that everybody remembers that it's not like we just download some software program and a problem is solved. That there's always some kind of human interaction that helps us to guide to what it is we're trying to achieve. Now, just we've been talking in kind of broad terms, just general big data and some of the types of improvements. Can you give us a real world example of a problem that you guys were able to solve for an organization? I know a lot of data needs to be kept private, but if there was one example you could share with us, I think that'd be really helpful to make sure people understand exactly what it is you do.
Sure. We worked with a leading home appliance services provider, which provides warranty services for American homes, right? We found out that their average turnaround time to repair appliances from the time that the issue was reported was about 23 to 25 days. Imagine your dishwasher not being available or your fridge not being available for 25 days. Not a very happy experience for customers. So one of the projects that we worked with them was to see whether we could reduce 95% of such use cases to under 5 days. Now that was a great goal to have, but to get that actioned, we had multiple analytical solutions that we delivered. One was, can we predict which kind of appliances would potentially get defective, and what kind of parts would potentially get defective in different regions of US. So there was about 60,000 regional units that this business was catering to, can we predict part failure, right? Now, when a customer calls, he gives some information saying, hey, my washing machine is making this whirring sound. Based on that information that the customer gave, can we predict what part is actually failing and have the technician go with that part proactively, right? Now, can we also, because we are able to predict part failure and understand what parts are going on, can we have technician workloads managed optimally? Can we have truck optimization kind of projects to say, can I have a technician's route mapped out in this? A combination of a lot of them actually helped us improve this thing significantly in terms of getting the turnaround times much faster and had happier customers. In fact, our NPS for our client improved by 4 basis points by just implementation of this project and the multiple analytical solutions on this.
Wow. So I can see, I'm trying to run through in my head, like all the data they had to have. They had to have a history of tickets. They had to have it itemized by kind of what appliance it was that broke down and the response time. Did they already have all that data together, or did you have to start putting that together after the project started?
They had it in different disparate systems, right? So we had to take all the data, pull it together, and this was now a use case that helped bring that data to life in terms of what insights you can give, right? They were doing forecasting using an Excel sheet with moving averages. So all they did was put it on Excel. Oh, the last 3 weeks was this. This is what it'll be this week. Nothing scientific. Nothing looking at weather data to actually incorporate into saying, you know what, if the weather is going to drop, you're obviously going to find out a lot of people using heaters a lot more. So potentially the problems within the heater is much more going to be dire, right? So let's make sure that we are prepared for that, right? So those are the kind of insights which is looking at internal as well as external data sources in a smart way helps you get better predictions and better accuracy to your forecasts.
Yeah, I think that would save so much time. I'm thinking about like the times that someone comes out to repair something and they say, okay, great, I found it. Now we got to order the part and it's going to be in a week. And if they come with the part. Now, what I'm looking forward to is when they just knock on your door and say, I'm here to fix your fridge. And you say, the fridge is fine. And they say, give me 5 minutes. It's going to go. We have the data. So very cool. Hey, I wanted to ask if people want to find out more information about you guys, where should they go?
Absolutely. We are there at www.latentview.com, at linkedin.com/latentview as well. Our Twitter handle is latentview. Do look us up. Do follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter because we've put out a lot of information. We have a latentview.com/blog where we post about some of the interesting work that we do and some of the work that we're doing with clients and clients talking about them as well. So please follow us and give us feedback in terms of what content is out there as well.
Yeah, I was looking through the site too, and you've got case studies, white papers, infographics, newsletter, a lot of thought leadership out there that can help people. Are you guys active in the conference scene as well? Do you have any events coming up or anything like that?
We actually host our own events, analytics conferences. In fact, we are having a couple of what we call the miniature ones. We've got a couple of lunch and learn series happening in Seattle and Los Angeles. The LA one is on March 15th and the Seattle one is on March 22nd. Again, all the information is available on the website. Please, if you are interested in that, please register for that and we'll be happy to host you as well.
Sounds good. All right. Anything else, Don, you wanted to ask before we wrap up?
No, it's exciting stuff. Well, for some of us, we might say like, oh, I don't want to deal with data, but there's plenty of people out there. We've interviewed several over the years that, people get really excited about data. And I'm just always amazed at the information you can get out of it. You take this giant pile of data and all of a sudden you turn it into something actionable. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much, Krishnan, for joining us today. And we'll be sure to check in with you maybe a while down the road and see what's new and what other things you guys have that you've been working on. Sound good?
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for your time. And the pleasure was all mine.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And thank you all of you for watching. But we're going to be right back with more Technado right after this. So stay tuned.
Enjoying Technado? Then be sure to check out Ignite, another podcast from the ProTV network. Ignite highlights stories of leadership as host Vicky Guy interviews a new business person each week. Learn more at itpro.tv/podcasts.
Welcome back to Technado, and thank you to Krishnan for joining us there. And Don, any key takeaways from that interview for you?
There's tons of companies that collect a lot of data and then it just sits there and does nothing. So it's neat to see organizations like his get out there and actually turn that into meaningful data and then help you to interpret it. So definitely check that out. And there's a lot of this stuff you can do yourself if you have the time and the resources. You can set up an elk stack, you can throw all the data in there and do your analytics. But there's a lot of logic that goes behind it. I mean, you saw where he mentioned where they're partnered up with a couple of universities to be able to draw in their research staff, and that's the kind of stuff it takes to really get good use out of your data.
Definitely. Well, we actually have to wrap up this podcast here because I just got a notification from my toaster that it needs to be repaired. So
yeah.
It knows exactly what part is wrong, and we're going to get that all figured out. But before we go, I want to let you know about a couple of things here happening at ITProTV. First of all, we've got some webinars coming up. We just had one today, actually. Get Hired in IT, 5 hacks for your LinkedIn profile, but that's going to be available to view in the archive very soon. We've also got one coming up on February 28th with Don, actually. 8 steps to a successful cloud migration. So you can head over to itpro.tv/webinars to register for that upcoming one, and also you can register retroactively and see all the archives for the ones that you may have missed in the past. So Don, we're very excited for those 8 steps. Have you come up with them yet?
Yeah, I was really trying to come up with 12 steps, but I just had 8.
Well, you could have just added, accept that there's a higher power.
Yeah.
first.
Call all your friends and tell them about the cloud migration.
Yeah. Definitely. Well, the first step is knowing that there's a problem. All right. And if you want to learn more about ITProTV, head over to go.itpro.tv/Technado. We've got a special offer code for you there for 30% off, also a 7-day free trial. You can find out about information for signing up your business as well. If you have a team, we've got some great rates and specials for groups that want to learn about IT and all things technology. So check that out at go.itpro.tv/Technado. Well, thank you very much, both of you. Thank you, Ronnie, for joining us today. It was great to have your insight.
Well, thank you again. It was a great time.
And your desk is right there, so if we ever need something again, we'll just grab you. You are physically the closest person to the Technado studio. So, all right, thank you all of you for joining us as well, and we will see you next week right here on Technado.
Are you enjoying Technado? Then be sure to check out our other podcast, Ask Me Anything, where our subject matter experts answer your questions. Here's the latest episode, and here's the full playlist. And as always, be sure to subscribe to ITProTV's channel. ITProTV!